My sister broke my $2,500 wheelchair as a joke, so I took her to court. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and I've been paraplegic since I was 18. An accident changed my life, and now I rely on a custom wheelchair that cost me $2,500. It's not just a chair. It's my independence, my way of getting around my freedom. My family's always been close, or at least that's how it used to feel. But then there's my sister, Sarah, 27, always the jokester, always looking for a laugh. She's the kind of person who thinks every moment is a setup for her next big prank, no matter how anyone else feels about it. A few weeks ago, we had a family reunion at my place. I was hosting, which meant dealing with the chaos of my relatives piling into my house. I like seeing everyone, but it's always a lot. And then Sarah shows up late, already smelling like she'd had a few too many drinks. She barged in with a goofy grin, loudly making her usual round of jokes. Some of them were all right, others just felt like she was trying too hard. But that's Sarah. No one calls her out, and she never seems to notice when her jokes cross a line. It started with little comments. Sarah threw out a few quips about how she wished she had a cool ride like mine, gesturing at my wheelchair. Everyone else just laughed, awkwardly shifting in their seats. But I could feel the air in the room change. I tried to shrug it off. This wasn't the first time she'd said stuff like that. But then she decided she needed to get more hands-on with her jokes. Sarah strutted over to me, grabbed the handles of my wheelchair, and started pushing me around the room like we were kids playing with a go-kart. She even made engine noises like this was some kind of game. At first I thought she'd stop if I asked, so I told her, "Hey, cut it out, man." She just laughed louder, saying she was lightening the mood. Nobody else said a word. They just kept glancing around, some trying to pretend like they didn't notice. I looked at my parents, but they just gave me that look that said, "Just let it go." But I couldn't. So I told Sarah again, firmly, this time I wasn't playing around. "My chair isn't a toy." Sarah smirked like I challenged her and said, "Relax, I'm just messing with you." And then she got it in her head to try something even more ridiculous. She tried to do a wheelie with my chair, yeah. You read that right. She yanked back on the handles, trying to lift the front wheels off the ground. I shouted at her to stop, but she just kept going. Then it all went south. She couldn't keep her balance, and the wheelchair tipped. One of the wheels landed hard on the floor with a loud crack. I barely managed to catch myself as I tumbled out of the chair, but my focus immediately snapped to the wheelchair. The right wheel was bent out of shape. The frame was twisted. It was trashed. The room went dead silent. And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, Sarah would realize how badly she'd screwed up. Instead, she just shrugged and said, "It's not a big deal. I was just joking around." She didn't even apologize. My face was burning with anger, but all she could see was her own embarrassment. I demanded that she pay for the damage, but she just threw her hands up and said she didn't have that kind of money. Some family members jumped in, trying to play peacemaker. My aunt said Sarah didn't mean it. She just got carried away. My uncle thought I was blowing things out of proportion, saying, "You know how Sarah is." But this wasn't about how Sarah is. This was my mobility, my independence. And now I was stuck using a manual backup wheelchair. That's a literal pain to get around in. It's clunky and way harder for me to move around in. But I had no choice. I kept pushing Sarah to pay for the repairs, but she just kept saying she couldn't afford it. It became obvious she thought I'd just drop it and move on. But after that night, I couldn't just let it go. A few friends who'd heard the story couldn't believe how Sarah acted, and they were the ones who helped me see my options. They pointed out that if Sarah wouldn't take responsibility, I could take her to small claims court. At first, it sounded extreme, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about holding her accountable for once. So that's what I did. I filed the paperwork to take Sarah to small claims court for the $2,500 to cover the cost of a replacement wheelchair. Word spread fast through the family, and the reactions were all over the place. Some said I was taking it too far, that I was going to ruin the family over a stupid mistake. Others, mostly the ones who'd been on the receiving end of Sarah's pranks before, thought she finally needed a wake-up call. But for the first time, I didn't care what they thought I knew. I couldn't back down this time. I could tell Sarah wasn't taking it seriously, though. She sent me this smug text. I knew taking Sarah to court wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. This wasn't just about the wheelchair. It was the last straw. For years, She'd made jokes at my expense, treating my situation like an excuse for her pranks. It was as if, in her mind, I was just a character in her comedy. But this time, I couldn't laugh it off. I couldn't pretend everything was okay. The court date came quickly, and the tension in the air was heavy. Sarah walked into the courtroom with that same irritating expression, as if the whole thing was still some kind of joke. She didn't even look worried. She was dressed casually, as if she were heading to a family lunch, and I could tell she still didn't believe I had the guts to go through with it. When the judge entered, the murmuring stopped. I was nervous, but I kept my composure. As the hearing began, my lawyer laid out the facts. We showed photos of the broken wheelchair, the repair estimates, and explained how my independence had been impacted. I used my backup manual wheelchair to demonstrate how much harder it was to get around and how even the simplest tasks had become a nightmare. Throughout the hearing, Sarah stayed relaxed. When it was her turn to speak, she gave the same excuse she always used. It was just a joke. I didn't mean any harm. The judge looked at her sternly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of worry on her face. I think she finally realized this wasn't going to end the way she thought. My family was seated behind me in the courtroom, and I could feel their discomfort. My mom wrung her hands nervously, and my dad stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact with me. They weren't on my side. They never really had been. They thought I was overreacting, that it was just a wheelchair, and nothing justified tearing the family apart, as if Sarah's pranks hadn't already done that long ago. The judge's decision was swift and clear. Sarah was responsible for the damage and had to pay the $2,500 for a new wheelchair. A wave of relief washed over me. For the first time, someone other than me was saying that what she did wasn't okay. Sarah went pale and tried to argue that she didn't have the money. But the judge was firm. If she didn't pay, there would be legal consequences. As soon as the hearing ended, Sarah stormed out, furious, saying I had ruined the family over a chair. None of my family members came to speak with me. They all ran after her, as they always did, trying to comfort her, as if I were the villain in this story. That night, I went home alone. It felt strange to realize that my family, the people I grew up with and thought would always support me, had never really seen me as a whole person. To them, I was just a burden who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. But for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I wasn't carrying their expectations anymore. A few weeks later, my mom sent me a message asking to talk. I knew what was coming, but I decided to give her a chance. We met at a nearby cafe, and she launched into the speech I had expected. "You know your sister didn't mean any harm." I laughed bitterly. She kept going, talking about how Sarah was going through a tough time and how I needed to understand that family is family. I looked her in the eye and calmly asked, "And when will someone understand what I'm going through? When will anyone care about my pain?" She fell silent, guilt flickering across her face for the first time. But it was too late for me. In the months that followed, the distance between me and my family grew wider. They blamed me for the rift, acting like I was the problem. Sarah refused to pay right away, and it took a long legal process, including threats of asset seizure, to finally get the money from her. But the money wasn't what mattered most. What truly mattered was that, at last, I had stood up for myself. One day, I got a message from my dad, inviting me to Sarah's daughter's birthday party. He said Sarah wanted to apologize, and that we should move on. I declined. Not because I held a grudge, but because I finally understood that I didn't need their approval anymore. I was fine on my own. The new wheelchair arrived, bringing with it a renewed sense of freedom. I moved on with my life, made new friends, and gradually distanced myself from my family. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. They never understood that this wasn't about money or jokes. It was about respect, something I had learned to demand, even if it meant rolling through life on my own. And Sarah? Well, she never tried to contact me again. I heard through the grapevine that her life wasn't going well. Her reckless behavior and constant pranks drove people away. She lost her job, and her boyfriend left her not long after. Maybe, just maybe, she finally learned the difference between a joke and a humiliation. As for me, I kept moving forward. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to apologize for being who I am or for demanding respect. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that family isn't always the people you share blood with. Sometimes, family is the people who choose to stand by you and respect who you are. And I finally found that. Months passed since the court hearing, and although I initially felt relieved, the aftermath was harder than I expected. I knew things wouldn't be the same with my family, but the isolation that followed hit me deeper than I imagined. Still, I came to realize that some decisions, no matter how painful, are necessary for peace of mind. This fight wasn't just about the wheelchair. It was about respect and autonomy, things I never thought I'd have to demand from my own family. During this time, my mom tried to reconcile with me several times, always saying the same thing. You know, Sarah didn't mean any harm. But the problem wasn't just how Sarah is. It was about how everyone always excused her behavior, no matter what damage she caused, even when it was something as vital as my wheelchair. The lack of empathy hurt the most, and I knew that for my own well-being, I had to distance myself, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Months after the court's decision, Sarah finally paid for the wheelchair, though without any apology. The payment came as a bank transfer. No message, no words. That was her way of saying, in her mind, that it was over. But for me, the real closure didn't come with the money. It came when I accepted that I couldn't change other people, only how I reacted to them. With the money, I purchased a new wheelchair identical to the one she had broken. Receiving it felt like regaining a part of myself that had been taken away. It wasn't just a means of getting around, it was my freedom. I could go out without hesitation, move without struggling, and live without the burden of the old manual wheelchair that had made life unnecessarily difficult. The sense of freedom returned, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. I started seeking support outside my family circle. I joined disability advocacy groups and made friends who truly understood what I was going through in ways my family never could. These new connections showed me that I didn't have to fight every battle alone, that there were people who would stand by me and support me. Slowly, my life took on new meaning. I enrolled in assistive technology courses and began giving talks on independence and the importance of demanding respect. I found that many people, like me, were struggling to be seen and heard in a world that often dismisses our experiences. Becoming a voice in that space was empowering and healing for me. Meanwhile, the attempts from my family to reconnect dwindled. They realized I wasn't going to fall back into the same toxic dynamic. My dad made one last attempt, inviting me to a family gathering, saying that Sarah wanted to apologize and that we should move on. But I knew that conversation wouldn't bring the change I needed. I had already forgiven Sarah in my heart, but I didn't need her validation to move forward. That part of my life was already behind me. I politely declined the invitation, telling my dad that I wished them well, but I was no longer interested in patching up something that was already finished for me. He was silent for a moment, and for the first time, I felt he understood. After that, they stopped trying to convince me. Sarah, on the other hand, took a rougher path. Over time, her reckless behavior and lack of responsibility began catching up with her. I heard through the grapevine that she lost her job after making an inappropriate joke at work, and her boyfriend left her soon after. It was sad to see her spiral, but it was her journey to face, not mine. I could no longer carry the burden of her choices. As time passed, I found happiness and peace. The emotional scars were still there, but they no longer hurt the way they used to. Each day felt like a step toward a fuller, more confident version of myself. I learned to celebrate the small victories, going out for coffee on my own, working on new projects, and most importantly, being at peace with my decisions. Looking back, I see that the court hearing was just the beginning of something bigger, building my emotional independence. Life isn't simple, and the people we love don't always treat us the way we deserve. But the most important thing is learning to value yourself, even if it means letting go of certain relationships along the way. As for my family, I hope they're doing well. I hold no resentment toward them anymore. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about accepting or forgetting what happened. It's about freeing myself from the weight of that pain. And that's exactly what I did. Closing that chapter was an act of self-love. And Sarah, I hope she finds her way and perhaps learns something from all this. but I no longer need her approval or anyone else's. I am enough, just as I am, and that, more than anything, is the real closure I've been looking for.